The moment Honda made its move, almost nobody noticed. That was the point. While Tesla was unveiling gigafactories and BYD was breaking its own sales records, Honda was doing something far less dramatic. No stage, no countdown. No Elon-style reveal with smoke and spotlights. Honda was in a room full of engineers, quietly solving a problem that the rest of the industry had decided to ignore, and that problem wasn't about making a faster car, or a flashier one, or one with a bigger screen. It was about something far more basic, something that millions of people experience every single day, but almost no one in the EV industry wanted to talk about. What happens when the battery dies and there's no charger for 50 miles? That question sounds simple, but the answer to it is about to change the entire direction of the auto industry. Because Honda didn't just ask that question. Honda built the answer. And when the world finally looked up from the EV race long enough to pay attention, the game had already shifted. But to understand why this matters, you have to go back to the moment when everyone else stopped paying attention to Honda in the first place. It was somewhere around 2020 when the consensus became almost religious. Electric vehicles were the future. Full stop. No debate. The International Energy Agency was publishing targets. Governments were announcing EV-only deadlines. Investors were pouring money into anything with a battery and a charging port. Tesla's stock was doing things that made no financial sense and yet somehow kept going up. The story was irresistible. Clean energy, zero emissions. The death of the combustion engine. Progress and Honda. Honda was selling hybrids, which, in the eyes of the industry, was basically the same as selling film cameras in 2007. What nobody stopped to ask was whether the EV dream and the EV reality were actually the same thing. Because on paper, EVs were perfect. But on the ground, something else was happening. In apartment buildings across Europe and Asia, people who wanted EVs realized they had nowhere to charge them. No private parking, no charger in the building, just a wish and a waiting list for a public charging spot. In rural America, drivers were doing mental math before every long trip, calculating whether the range would hold and what they'd do if it didn't. In Canada and Scandinavia, EVO owners were watching their range estimates shrink in real time as temperatures dropped in January. A car rated for 350 kilometers in summer was delivering 200 in winter. And battery replacement costs, if something went wrong after the warranty expired, were landing like a financial ambush. Hundreds of thousands of rupees, tens of thousands of dollars. For a battery, the world wanted EV, but the world wasn't ready for them. And almost nobody in the industry was willing to say that out loud. Honda said it, not in a press release, not in a keynote. Honda said it the way engineers say things, by building something different. The thinking inside Honda was straightforward, almost uncomfortably so. People don't want charging anxiety. They don't want range fear. They don't want to plan their road trip around the location of charging stations, the way a sailor used to plan routes around freshwater ports. They want to get in the car, drive, and arrive. That's it. That's the whole product. So Honda asked a different question than the rest of the industry. Not how do we make a better EV, but how do we give people the feeling of an EV without the part that's making them hesitate? The answer was a hybrid system, but not the clunky, compromised hybrid of 15 years ago. Something fundamentally smarter. A system Honda had been quietly refining for nearly a decade while the rest of the world was distracted by the EV spectacle. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. For a lot of people who made very large bets on one direction, here's what Honda actually built. At its core, the system has three components: a petrol engine, an electric motor, and a small battery pack. But the key word is small, not the massive, expensive, degradation-prone battery that defines an EV and determines its cost, its range, and its vulnerability to cold weather. A small, smart battery that never needs to be plugged in, because the car charges it itself. Think about what that means for a second. When you're moving slowly, through city traffic, through school zones, through the stop-and-start rhythm of an urban commute, the electric motor handles it. The petrol engine isn't burning fuel. The car is quiet. The drive feels smooth, almost surreal, like the car is gliding rather than grinding. Then you hit the highway. You need to accelerate, to overtake, to climb. The petrol engine comes alive. not instead of the electric motor. Alongside it, both systems working together, delivering power in a way that feels seamless because it is seamless. The driver doesn't manage any of this. There's no button to press, no mode to select. The car is making hundreds of small decisions every minute, invisibly, automatically. And when you brake, that energy, the heat and friction, that in a normal car just disappears into the air, gets captured and converted back into electricity. The battery charges itself every time you slow down, every red light, every exit ramp, every time you ease off the accelerator on a long downhill stretch. The car is harvesting energy that other cars are throwing away. The result is fuel efficiency that sounds impossible until you see it. 27 to 28 kilometers per liter in city driving. Real-world numbers, not laboratory projections. But the fuel economy is almost a secondary point. The primary point is this: you never have to think about charging. If you run low on petrol, you stop for 5 minutes at any one of the millions of petrol stations that already exist everywhere on Earth, and you're done. No waiting, no planning, no anxiety. Now, consider the 3 problems that have quietly been stalling EV adoption for years. The problems that every EV company knows about, but tends to address with optimism rather than solutions. The first is charging time. Even with the fastest commercial chargers available today, you're looking at 30 minutes minimum for a meaningful charge. With a standard home charger, you're looking at overnight. For someone who drives long distances, or who forgets to plug in, or who lives somewhere without reliable charging infrastructure, this isn't a minor inconvenience. It's a fundamental incompatibility with real life. Honda's hybrid has no charging time, zero. An EV battery is not a phone battery that costs $50 to replace. It's a component that costs, depending on the vehicle, anywhere from several 100,000 rupees to over $1 million. And, like all batteries, it degrades. Every charge cycle wears it slightly. After 3 or 4 years, the range is noticeably shorter than it was on day 1. After 7 or 8 years, you're facing a choice between an expensive replacement and a car that no longer does what you bought it to do. Honda's hybrid battery, by contrast, is small, lightly used, and shared with a petrol engine that takes the heavy lifting. The battery never gets pushed to its limits. It lasts longer. And when it does eventually need attention, the cost is a fraction of an EV battery replacement. The third problem is cold weather performance. Lithium-ion batteries lose efficiency in low temperatures. This is basic chemistry, not a flaw in any particular manufacturer's design. In winter, an EV that normally delivers 300 kilometers of range might deliver 180 in extreme cold. The drop can be even steeper. For someone in northern Canada, in Scandinavia, in the mountains of Central Asia, this isn't a seasonal inconvenience. It's a reliability crisis. Honda's hybrid responds to cold weather by doing something elegantly simple. When the battery's performance drops, the petrol engine picks up the slack automatically, without the driver even noticing. The car doesn't slow down. The range doesn't collapse. It just keeps going. 3 problems. 1 system. No trade dash-offs. The global market noticed. Even if it didn't make the same headlines as a new Tesla model or a BYD sales record, in the United States, the Honda Accord Hybrid became the best-selling hybrid sedan in the country. In Japan, where electricity costs are high and EV infrastructure is still developing, buyers began shifting to hybrids faster than analysts had predicted. In Europe, where governments had been pushing hard for EV adoption, a quieter counter-movement was growing. People in cities without home charging, people who rent rather than own, people who simply couldn't make EVs work in their actual lives were choosing hybrids, and many of them were choosing Honda. Analysts who had been drawing straight-line projections of EV dominance started revising their models. By 2030, some now say hybrid vehicles could hold a larger share of the global market than pure EVs. Not because EVs failed, but because hybrids solved problems that EVs hadn't solved yet. Honda didn't make a single dramatic announcement about any of this. The company just kept selling cars. So where does that leave the industry? EVs are not going away. The technology is real, the environmental case is real, and the investment is too deep to reverse. But the EV future that was supposed to arrive on a single track, clean and inevitable, is fracturing into something more complicated. Hybrids, pure EVs, hydrogen, 3 technologies. 3 different answers to the same question. competing for the same parking spaces, and Honda, the company that everyone had quietly written off as too conservative, too conventional, too attached to engines that burn things, is sitting at the center of that fracture with a product that works. Right now, in the cold, in the countryside,